Staff Sergeant Maria Santos had seen enough war zones to know when something felt wrong. The morning air in Kandahar carried an unusual silence that made her skin crawl. She adjusted her rifle scope and scanned the seemingly empty streets below from her overwatch position on the third floor of a bombed-out apartment building. Ghost Actual, this is Overwatch. I've got eyes on the target building, but something's off, she whispered into her radio. The crackling response from her commanding officer confirmed her worst fears. Copy that, Overwatch. Intel says 12 enemy snipers are operating in that sector. They've been picking off our patrols for 3 weeks now. Not a single confirmed visual on any of them. Maria felt her jaw tighten. 12 invisible killers had been terrorizing the entire forward operating base. 3 Marines were already dead, and twice as many wounded. The brass was getting desperate, and that desperation had led them to her. She wasn't supposed to be here. According to half the men in her unit, women had no business behind a sniper rifle in active combat. The other half had learned to keep their mouths shut after watching her consistently outshoot every marksman in the battalion during training. But this wasn't training. This was life and death, and 12 phantoms were making fools of an entire Marine company. "Ma'am, are you sure about this?" came the voice of Corporal Johnson, her spotter, positioned 15 meters to her left. The young Marine's nervousness was obvious even through his attempt to sound professional. "Johnson, I didn't ask for your opinion on my capabilities," Maria replied calmly, never taking her eye off the scope. "I asked for target information." The truth was, she understood his concern. The enemy snipers had proven themselves masters of urban camouflage. They appeared just long enough to take their shots before vanishing like smoke. Traditional counter-sniper tactics had failed completely. Thermal imaging showed nothing. Movement sensors gave false readings. Even Apache helicopter gun runs had come up empty. Maria had studied every after-action report from the past 3 weeks. The enemy was using the city's destroyed infrastructure to their advantage, creating firing positions that seemed impossible to detect. But she had noticed patterns that others had missed. Small details that suggested these weren't just skilled marksmen, but a coordinated team with specific operational procedures. Ghost Actual, request permission to move to alternate position Alpha, she radioed. Negative, Overwatch. Hold current position and maintain surveillance. Maria bit back her frustration. The command structure was treating this like a standard reconnaissance mission, but standard tactics had already failed. She needed to think like her enemy, not like a Marine following doctrine. The first shot came at 0847 hours. The distinctive crack of a high-velocity round echoed through the urban canyon, followed immediately by panicked radio chatter from the patrol moving through the street below. Maria's scope swept frantically across the building facades, searching for muzzle flash or movement. Nothing. Ghost 7 is down. Ghost 7 is down. We need immediate medevac. Another Marine wounded. Another invisible killer claiming a victim. Maria forced herself to remain calm and focused. Panic would only make her another casualty statistic. She had memorized the ballistics data from previous attacks. The enemy was using Soviet-era Dragunov rifles with custom modifications for urban warfare. The sound signature suggested the shooter was positioned somewhere in the block of buildings directly across from her current location. "Johnson, did you catch the audio signature on that shot?" "Roger, Mom." Sounded like it came from the northeast, maybe 300 meters. Maria was already adjusting her position. The enemy sniper would be relocating now, following what she suspected was a predetermined movement pattern. If her theory was correct, the shooter would move to one of 3 secondary positions within the next 4 minutes. She had studied the architectural layout of this district for hours before the mission. Most of the buildings showed obvious battle damage, but some structures retained enough structural integrity to support concealed firing positions. The key was thinking three-dimensionally about the urban environment. The second shot came 6 minutes later. This time, Maria was ready. Her scope was already trained on the building where she expected the muzzle flash, and she caught the briefest glimpse of movement in a 4th-floor window. Not enough for a return shot, but enough to confirm her suspicions about the enemy's movement patterns. "Ghost Actual, I have possible enemy position." Request permission to engage. Do you have positive identification of the target? Maria hesitated. Military rules of engagement required clear visual confirmation before taking lethal action. She had movement and a probable firing position, but not a clear shot at the actual sniper. Negative on positive ID, but I have strong probable cause based on hold your fire Overwatch. We need confirmation before engaging. The radio went silent, leaving Maria alone with her growing frustration. Rules of engagement existed for good reasons, but those rules were written for conventional warfare scenarios. This enemy was exploiting the limitations of military doctrine, using the Marines' own procedures against them. She made a decision that would either save lives or end her career. Johnson, I'm moving to position Bravo. Maintain overwatch on my current sector. Ma'am, we weren't authorized to. I know what we were authorized to do, Corporal. Now follow your orders. Maria began moving through the building, using her knowledge of urban warfare to remain undetected. She had identified 3 potential firing positions that would give her better angles on the enemy's suspected locations. Getting to those positions would require breaking protocol and operating independently. The third shot rang out as she reached the building's eastern stairwell. This time, she was positioned to see the entire enemy sector from a different angle. The muzzle flash came from exactly where she had predicted, but from a building 1 block further north than her original estimate. The enemy was using multiple structures, moving between buildings through concealed routes. Johnson, did you see that flash? Negative, ma'am. I don't have line of sight on that position from here. That confirmed Maria's growing understanding of the tactical situation. The enemy snipers weren't just invisible because of superior camouflage. They were operating from positions that couldn't be effectively observed from the Marines' current locations. The entire Overwatch strategy was fundamentally flawed. She keyed her radio again. Ghost Actual, this is Overwatch. I need to brief you on a tactical assessment. Go ahead, Overwatch. Sir, the enemy is operating from positions that can't be effectively countered from our current deployment. They're using building-to-building movement routes that keep them outside our observation zones. We need to reposition our entire Overwatch strategy. The radio silence stretched long enough that Maria wondered if her transmission had been received. Overwatch, hold current position, and continue surveillance. That's an order. Maria closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had 2 choices: follow orders and watch more Marines die, or take action that might save lives, but would definitely end her military career. The sound of boots on concrete echoed from the street below. Another patrol was moving through the kill zone. She looked through her scope at the Marines advancing along the street, unaware that they were walking into a carefully prepared ambush. These were fellow warriors, men and women who trusted their leadership to keep them safe. The 4th shot would come in approximately 8 minutes if the pattern held. Maria made her choice. Maria moved through the abandoned building like a ghost herself, using every technique she had learned in urban warfare training. The concrete walls were pockmarked with bullet holes and shrapnel scars, but the structure remained sound enough to support her weight as she navigated toward her new position. She had exactly 7 minutes before the next attack, according to her analysis of the enemy's timing patterns. 7 minutes to reach a position where she could potentially save the lives of the Marines walking into another ambush. Ghost Actual, this is Overwatch requesting immediate tactical support, she whispered into her radio while moving. Overwatch, maintain your assigned position. Do not deviate from mission parameters. Maria switched off her radio. She couldn't afford the distraction of arguing with command while trying to outmaneuver 12 enemy snipers who had already proven their lethal effectiveness. The building she was moving through had been a residential complex before the war. Now it was a maze of rubble-filled rooms and collapsed sections. But Maria had studied the architectural plans during mission preparation, and she knew these Soviet-era buildings followed predictable construction patterns. She reached the 4th floor and began moving toward the eastern side of the building. From there, she would have visual access to the sector where she expected the next muzzle flash. More importantly, she would have a clear shot at the building where the enemy was operating. The sound of automatic weapons fire erupted from the street below. Maria froze and listened carefully to the pattern of gunfire. It wasn't random shooting. The enemy had initiated contact with the patrol, but the firing pattern was disciplined and controlled. These weren't panicked insurgents spraying bullets. This was a coordinated military operation. She reached the window position and immediately began scanning the target buildings through her scope. The enemy sniper would be repositioning now, moving to a new firing location according to their operational plan. There, movement in a third-floor window, approximately 250 meters northeast of her position. Not the clear silhouette of a human target, but the subtle shift of shadow that indicated someone moving behind cover. Maria adjusted her scope and controlled her breathing. The target was partially concealed behind debris, but she could see enough of the firing position to take a shot. The question was whether military rules of engagement allowed her to fire at a position rather than a clearly identified person. Another burst of automatic weapons fire from the street below reminded her that Marines were dying while she debated legal technicalities. She squeezed the trigger. The .308 round crossed the distance in less than half a second and punched through the concrete wall where she had detected movement. Maria immediately began scanning for secondary targets while chambering another round. The return fire came from two different buildings simultaneously. High-velocity rounds shattered the window frame around Maria's position, forcing her to drop below the concrete sill. The enemy had identified her location with frightening speed and was already engaging with coordinated fire from multiple positions. She rolled away from the window and moved to an alternate firing position 15 meters to the south. The enemy response confirmed her worst fears about their capabilities. These weren't amateur fighters hiding in buildings. This was a professional military unit with sophisticated tactical coordination. "Johnson, report," she called in her radio after switching it back on. "Overwatch, I heard your shot, and then all hell broke loose down here. The patrol is pinned down and requesting immediate support." Maria reached her alternate position and began scanning the enemy buildings again. The smart tactical decision would be to call for artillery support or airstrikes, but those options would take time that the pin patrol didn't have. She identified muzzle flashes coming from 4 different windows across 3 separate buildings. The enemy unit was larger than intelligence had indicated, and they were operating with a level of coordination that suggested professional military training. Her second shot took out a sniper who had exposed himself while engaging the patrol below. The 7.62 millimeters round found its target, and Maria saw the distinctive spray of blood against the concrete wall behind the enemy position. 1 down, 11 to go. The return fire was immediate and devastating. High explosive rounds began impacting around her position, indicating that the enemy had access to more than just sniper rifles. They were using rocket-propelled grenades and automatic weapons in a coordinated suppression effort. Maria abandoned her current position and began moving deeper into the building. She needed to create distance between herself and the enemy's targeted area while maintaining the ability to engage their positions. The sound of helicopter rotors approached from the south. "All units, this is Apache 7-7. We have eyes on the target area and are standing by for target designation." Maria felt a surge of hope. Air support would change the tactical equation dramatically, but she needed to provide accurate target information for the helicopter's weapon systems. "Apache 7-7, this is Overwatch. I have visual on multiple enemy positions and can provide real-time targeting data." "Copy that, Overwatch. Send coordinates for priority targets." Maria began calling out building locations and floor numbers where she had identified enemy activity. The Apache's 30mm cannon began engaging the targets with devastating precision, turning concrete walls into dust and debris. But the enemy response surprised everyone. Surface-to-air missiles began launching from concealed positions throughout the city sector. The Apache pilot's voice crackled over the radio with urgency and alarm. Multiple SAM launches. Multiple SAM launches. were taking evasive action. Maria watched through her scope as the helicopter deployed countermeasures and began rapid maneuvering to avoid the incoming missiles. The enemy hadn't just prepared sniper positions. They had created an integrated air defense network throughout the urban area. The Apache managed to evade the first wave of missiles, but the pilot made the tactical decision to withdraw to a safer distance. The helicopter support would now be limited to long-range engagements that would be less precise and less immediately effective. Overwatch, you're on your own down there. We can't maintain close air support with those SAMs active. Maria was back to facing 12 professional snipers with nothing but her rifle and her tactical skills. The odds were not encouraging, but the Marines trapped in the street below were counting on her to find a solution. She began moving through the building again, using her knowledge of the enemy's positions to plan a systematic engagement strategy. If she couldn't rely on air support or artillery, she would have to hunt down each sniper individually. The enemy had made one tactical error that Maria intended to exploit. Their coordinated response to her initial shots had revealed the approximate locations of their primary firing positions. She now had a mental map of where they were operating, even if she couldn't see them directly. Her third shot came from a position they wouldn't expect. Instead of engaging from another window, Maria had moved to the building's damaged stairwell, which gave her an angled view into one of the enemy structures. She caught a sniper moving between positions and put a round through his center mass before he could reach cover. 2 down, 10 to go. The enemy's return fire was less coordinated this time. They were having trouble pinpointing her exact location because she wasn't engaging from predictable sniper positions. Maria was using the three-dimensional nature of urban combat to her advantage, just as her opponents had been doing. She continued moving through the building, always staying ahead of the enemy's attempts to target her location. Each shot she fired came from a different position, making it impossible for them to predict where she would appear next. Her fourth shot eliminated a sniper who had exposed himself while trying to engage the trap patrol. The enemy's tactical discipline was beginning to break down as they found themselves being hunted instead of doing the hunting. But Maria knew that her ammunition supply was limited, and she was operating alone against an enemy force that still outnumbered her 8 to 1. She needed to accelerate her engagement strategy before the enemy could reorganize their tactical response. The real hunt was just beginning. Maria crouched in the darkness of a collapsed bathroom, listening to the sound of boots moving through the building below her. The enemy had realized that she was operating inside their perimeter, and they were adapting their tactics accordingly. Instead of remaining in fixed sniper positions, they were now actively hunting her. She checked her ammunition count, 18 rounds remaining in her current magazine, with 4 additional magazines in her tactical vest. Against 8 remaining snipers who now knew her approximate location, those numbers weren't encouraging. The sound of boots stopped directly below her position. Maria controlled her breathing and remained perfectly still. The enemy sniper was probably listening for any sound that would reveal her exact location. One creaking floorboard or shifting piece of debris would bring a hail of gunfire through the concrete floor. Her radio crackled softly. Overwatch, this is Ghost Actual. We have QRF inbound to your position. Estimate 15 minutes out. Quick reaction force meant heavily armed Marines with armored vehicles. But 15 minutes might as well be 15 hours when facing professional snipers who were actively searching for her position. Maria heard voices speaking in what sounded like Chechen or perhaps Dari. The accents were wrong for local insurgents, confirming her suspicion that these were foreign fighters with military training. That explained their sophisticated tactics and coordination. She began moving toward the building's central stairwell, using debris and collapsed walls to mask her movement. The enemy was conducting a floor-by-floor search, but they would be expecting her to remain in a fixed position like a conventional sniper. Her fifth shot came from the stairwell landing. As she descended toward the 3rd floor, Maria caught sight of a figure moving through the hallway below. The shot was an extreme downward angle through a gap in the concrete stairs, but she had a clear silhouette for approximately 2 seconds. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and she saw the target fall. 3 down, 8 to go. The return fire was immediate and overwhelming. Automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple directions, filling the stairwell with concrete dust and ricocheting bullets. Maria threw herself against the landing wall and covered her head as debris rained down around her. She was trapped. The enemy had positioned themselves to cover all exit routes from the stairwell. They knew she was there, and they were systematically destroying her cover with sustained automatic weapons fire. Maria looked up through the damaged ceiling and saw daylight filtering through the building's destroyed upper floors. The roof level might provide an escape route, but reaching it would require climbing through 2 floors of potentially compromised structure while under fire. She had no other choice. Using the concrete landing as cover, Maria began climbing toward the 4th floor. The building's structure groaned ominously under the impact of continuous gunfire, but the Soviet-era construction was solid enough to absorb tremendous punishment without immediate collapse. Enemy voices echoed through the stairwell as they coordinated their search. Maria could hear them moving to cut off her escape routes while maintaining suppressive fire on her last known position. She reached the 4th floor and immediately began moving toward the building's eastern side. From there, she might be able to cross to an adjacent building using the connecting walkways that were common in this type of residential complex. Her 6th shot came through a hole in the exterior wall. Maria had positioned herself where she could see into the building across the narrow alley. An enemy sniper was moving past a window, apparently repositioning to get a better angle on the stairwell where she had been trapped. The round took him center mass, and she watched him fall backward into the room. 4 down, 7 to go. But her muzzle flash had revealed her new position to the remaining enemy snipers. High-velocity rounds began impacting the wall around her, forcing her to abandon the firing position immediately. Maria rolled away from the window and began crawling toward the building's rear section. She could hear enemy fighters moving through the floors below her, systematically clearing each room as they advanced toward her position. The connecting walkway to the adjacent building had been damaged by previous fighting, but it looked stable enough to support her weight. The crossing would leave her exposed for approximately 10 seconds, which was more than enough time for a trained sniper to acquire and engage her. She had to take the risk. Maria sprinted across the damaged walkway, expecting to feel the impact of enemy bullets at any second. Instead, she heard the distinctive whistle of an incoming mortar round. The explosion shattered windows throughout the building complex and filled the air with dust and debris. The enemy was using indirect fire weapons to deny her escape routes, while their snipers maintained pressure from multiple directions. She reached the adjacent building and immediately began looking for a defensive position. The structure was even more heavily damaged than the previous one, with entire sections collapsed and others showing obvious structural instability. But the damage also provided opportunities. Maria found a position where she could see back into the building she had just left. Through a gap in the collapsed exterior wall, she had a clear view of the hallway where enemy fighters were advancing. Her 7th shot eliminated a sniper who was moving too confidently through what he thought was a secured area. 5 down, 6 to go. The enemy's response was swift and professional. Instead of charging toward her new position, they withdrew from the exposed areas and began coordinating a flanking movement designed to surround her building. Maria realized that she was facing opponents who understood urban warfare as well as she did. They weren't making the tactical mistakes that would allow her to pick them off one by one. Instead, they were using superior numbers and coordinated movement to gradually reduce her options. She needed to change the tactical equation. The damaged building's upper floors were partially collapsed, creating a series of elevated positions that wouldn't be visible from ground level. If she could reach those positions, she might be able to engage the enemy from angles they wouldn't expect. But climbing to those positions would require abandoning most of her equipment and ammunition. She would be trading firepower for positional advantage, a gamble that could either save her life or ensure her death. Maria made the decision to abandon her heavy gear and began climbing toward the building's destroyed upper section. She kept only her rifle, basic ammunition, and essential survival equipment. The climb was treacherous. Twisted metal and unstable concrete threatened to give way with each step, and she could hear the enemy fighters moving through the lower floors as they searched for her. She reached a position where she could see across the entire urban combat zone from an elevated angle. The view revealed the full scope of the enemy's tactical deployment, and Maria realized that she had been fighting only a portion of their actual force. Additional enemy fighters were positioned throughout the surrounding buildings, creating a defensive network that extended far beyond the immediate combat area. The 12 snipers were just the visible element of a much larger enemy unit. Her radio crackled with an urgent transmission. "Overwatch, this is Ghost Actual. The QRF is taking heavy casualties from coordinated enemy fire. We need immediate intelligence on enemy positions." Maria keyed her radio. "Ghost Actual, you're walking into a complex ambush. I have visual on at least 20 enemy positions across multiple buildings." The silence that followed her transmission lasted long enough that she wondered if Command was beginning to understand the true scope of the tactical situation they were facing. "Overwatch, can you provide targeting data for airstrikes?" "Affirmative, but the enemy has active air defense systems. Any air support will be at extreme risk." Maria began calling out coordinates for the enemy positions she could identify from her elevated vantage point. Each position represented a lethal threat to the Marines attempting to reach her location. But even as she provided targeting information, Maria knew that air strikes alone wouldn't solve the tactical problem. The enemy had prepared for conventional military responses, and they had demonstrated the ability to adapt quickly to changing circumstances. She was going to have to finish this fight herself. From her elevated position in the destroyed building, Maria had a tactical view that changed everything. The enemy's defensive network wasn't random. It was a carefully planned urban fortress designed to funnel attacking forces into predetermined kill zones while protecting the defenders with overlapping fields of fire. But every defensive plan had weaknesses, and Maria was beginning to identify them. The enemy had positioned their forces to counter conventional military attacks from obvious approach routes. They were prepared for tanks, armored vehicles, and infantry advancing along streets and through ground-level buildings. What they hadn't prepared for was a single sniper operating from unconventional positions above their defensive line. Maria studied the pattern of enemy movements through her scope. They were rotating between positions on a timed schedule, probably to prevent any single location from being targeted by airstrikes or artillery. But the rotation pattern created brief windows of vulnerability as they moved between covered positions. Her 8th shot came during one of those transition movements. An enemy sniper was crossing between buildings using a concealed walkway 3 floors below Maria's position. The angle was difficult, requiring her to compensate for both distance and elevation, but she had a clear shot for approximately 3 seconds. The round found its target, and she watched the enemy fighter fall. 6 down, 5 to go. But this shot accomplished more than just eliminating another threat. The enemy's reaction to the unexpected angle of fire revealed their command structure and communication procedures. Maria watched through her scope as the remaining enemy fighters began rapid coordination efforts. Radio transmissions increased, and movement patterns changed immediately. Someone was giving orders, and those orders were being followed with military precision. She identified the enemy commander. In a 4th-floor position approximately 400 meters to her northeast, Maria spotted a figure who was clearly coordinating the enemy response. He wasn't engaging in direct combat, but he was using radio equipment and directing the movements of other fighters. Eliminating the commander would disrupt their coordination, but the shot would be at the extreme range of her rifle's effective accuracy. At 400 meters, through an urban environment with variable wind patterns, The probability of a successful hit was questionable. Maria decided to wait for a better opportunity. Instead, she began systematically engaging the enemy fighters who were moving to counter her elevated position. They had identified her general area and were attempting to reach positions where they could engage her effectively. Her ninth shot took out a sniper who was climbing the exterior of an adjacent building, apparently trying to reach a position where he could see into her elevated hide. 7 down, 4 to go. The enemy commander's voice crackled over radio frequencies that Maria could monitor through her tactical communication equipment. He was speaking in accented English, coordinating a withdrawal from their current positions. They were retreating. After weeks of successful operations against Marine patrols, the enemy unit had decided that Maria represented a threat that couldn't be countered with their current tactical deployment. They were abandoning their carefully prepared positions rather than continue fighting against a single American sniper. But Maria wasn't going to let them escape to set up the same deadly ambush somewhere else. She began moving through the damaged building, using her elevated position to track the enemy's withdrawal routes. They were moving in small groups, using covered approaches to reach extraction points outside the immediate combat zone. Her 10th shot came as she reached a position where she could see one of those extraction points. 2 enemy fighters were crossing an open area between buildings, probably thinking they were beyond the range of effective small arms fire. Maria's shot took down the trailing fighter at nearly 500 meters. 8 down, 3 to go. The remaining enemy fighters abandoned their organized withdrawal and began moving independently toward whatever escape routes they could find. The disciplined military unit had dissolved into individuals focused on survival rather than mission completion. Maria tracked one of them through her scope as he moved between positions in a building across the street. He was moving too quickly and carelessly, probably panicked by the systematic elimination of his unit. Her 11th shot ended his flight. 9 down, 2 to go. The enemy commander and one remaining sniper were still operating somewhere in the urban maze below her position. Maria knew they would be the most dangerous opponents because they would be the most desperate and unpredictable. She began moving toward a position where she could observe the most likely escape routes from the combat zone. The enemy commander would need to reach one of several vehicle pickup points or helicopter landing zones to successfully extract from the area. Movement in a building 2 blocks to the east caught her attention. Through her scope, Maria could see someone moving systematically through the structure, clearing each floor as he descended toward ground level. The movement pattern was too disciplined and controlled to be a civilian or an amateur fighter. She had found one of the remaining enemy snipers. The range was approximately 300 meters, and she had multiple opportunities for a clear shot as the target moved past windows and through doorways. But something about the movement pattern made her hesitate. The enemy sniper was moving too predictably, too obviously. He was either careless in his panic to escape, or he was deliberately exposing himself to draw her fire and reveal her position. Maria decided it was a trap. Instead of taking the obvious shot, she began scanning the surrounding buildings for the enemy commander or the second sniper who might be waiting for her to expose herself by engaging the visible target. She found him. Muzzle flash from a concealed position 500 meters to the south, aimed directly at her current location. The enemy commander had positioned himself to take her out the moment she fired at a subordinate. Maria threw herself sideways as the high-velocity round shattered concrete where she had been positioned. The enemy commander was an excellent marksman, and his shot had missed her by less than 6 inches. But his muzzle flash had revealed his exact position. Maria's 12th shot was fired from a prone position behind a concrete barrier, compensating for the extreme range and the elevated angle required to reach the enemy commander's position. The round crossed nearly half a kilometer of urban terrain and found its target. 10 down, 1 to go. The last enemy sniper abandoned his position immediately and began running toward what was probably a predetermined extraction point. Maria could see him moving through the streets below, no longer concerned with concealment or tactical movement. She tracked him through her scope as he ran, calculating the lead time required to hit a moving target at that range. The shot would require perfect timing and compensation for multiple variables, but it was achievable. Her 13th and final shot ended the threat that had terrorized Marine patrols for 3 weeks. 11 down, 0 to go. But as Maria chambered another round and continued scanning for additional threats, she realized that she had miscounted somewhere in the chaos of urban combat. Her target count had been based on intelligence estimates that were apparently inaccurate. She had eliminated 11 enemy fighters, not the 12 that had been reported. Or perhaps the 12th sniper had never existed at all. Maria maintained her overwatch position and continued scanning the urban terrain for any signs of remaining enemy activity. The combat zone had fallen completely silent, with no movement visible in any of the buildings where the enemy had been operating. Ghost Actual, this is Overwatch. All visible enemy contacts have been eliminated. I count 11 confirmed kills. The radio response came immediately. Outstanding work, Overwatch. The QRF is moving to secure the area and confirm your kill count. As Maria waited for the quick reaction force to reach her position, she reflected on the tactical lessons of the engagement. The enemy had been professional, well-equipped, and expertly trained in urban warfare. They had created a defensive network that had successfully operated for weeks against conventional military tactics. But they had made one critical error. They had underestimated the capabilities of a single American Marine who refused to follow conventional tactics when conventional tactics were failing to protect her fellow warriors. The sound of approaching helicopters signaled the end of the immediate threat, but Maria remained in position until the area was declared secure. In urban warfare, the battle wasn't over until every building had been cleared and every potential threat had been eliminated. She had proven that invisible enemies could be found and eliminated, but only by someone willing to think and fight outside the boundaries of standard military doctrine. The real victory wasn't just eliminating the enemy snipers. It was demonstrating that individual initiative and tactical creativity could overcome superior numbers and defensive advantages when applied by someone with the skills and determination to see the mission through to completion. 3 hours after the last shot was fired, Maria sat in the forward operating base's debriefing room, facing a panel of senior officers who were struggling to understand what had actually happened in the urban combat zone. The official after-action reports would be written and rewritten multiple times, but the immediate questions demanded immediate answers. Staff Sergeant Santos, you engaged and eliminated 11 enemy snipers operating in a coordinated defensive network, Colonel Matthews said, reading from preliminary reports. You accomplished this while operating alone and without direct authorization for most of your tactical movements. Maria remained at attention. That's correct, sir. You also ignored direct orders to maintain your assigned position and instead initiated independent combat operations against a numerically superior enemy force. Yes, sir. The silence in the room stretched uncomfortably as the officers processed the implications of what she had accomplished versus the military discipline issues raised by her methods. Major Williams, the battalion intelligence officer, leaned forward. Santos, help us understand the tactical situation as you assessed it. Why did standard Overwatch procedures fail against these particular enemy snipers? Maria had been thinking about that question since the engagement ended. The answer involved criticizing the tactical doctrine that had guided military operations for decades, but the officers deserved an honest assessment. Sir, the enemy was operating as a professional military unit with sophisticated urban warfare training. They had studied our tactical procedures and created a defensive network specifically designed to counter conventional military responses. Standard Overwatch positions were ineffective because they were operating from positions that couldn't be effectively observed from our authorized deployment areas. Are you suggesting that our established tactical procedures are inadequate? Colonel Matthews asked. Maria chose her words carefully. Sir, I'm suggesting that enemy forces with professional military training can exploit the predictable aspects of our tactical procedures when they have sufficient time to prepare the battlefield according to their operational plan. Major Williams made notes in his tablet. The enemy commander that you eliminated in your final engagement. Intel indicates he was a former Soviet Spetsnaz officer with extensive experience in urban warfare. How did you identify him as the command element? Sir, I observed the communication patterns and coordination methods being used by the enemy force. The command element was directing tactical movements and coordinating defensive responses from a position that allowed oversight of the entire operational area. And you made the tactical decision to eliminate the command element rather than the individual fighters who posed more immediate threats. Maria nodded. Yes, sir. Eliminating the command structure would disrupt their coordination and reduce their ability to respond effectively to changing tactical circumstances. The questions continued for 2 more hours, covering every aspect of the engagement from ammunition expenditure to rules of engagement compliance. Maria answered each question directly and professionally, but she knew that her career was probably over. Military organizations valued initiative and combat effectiveness, but they also required adherence to command authority and established procedures. She had achieved remarkable tactical success while violating fundamental military discipline standards. Colonel Matthews finally closed his folder. Santos, you're being recommended for the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism in combat. You're also facing a formal inquiry regarding failure to follow direct orders during combat operations. Maria felt the conflicting emotions of pride and uncertainty. The Navy Cross was the second highest military decoration for combat valor, reserved for Marines who demonstrated extraordinary heroism in life-threatening situations. But a formal inquiry could result in court-martial proceedings and the end of her military career. Sir, I understand the situation. Do you have any regrets about your tactical decisions during the engagement? Maria thought about the Marines who had been pinned down in the street below, facing enemy fire from invisible positions that conventional tactics couldn't counter. She thought about the 3 Marines who had been killed in previous attacks by the same enemy unit. No, sir. I would make the same decisions again under similar circumstances. 2 weeks later, Maria stood in formation as Colonel Matthews read the citation that accompanied her Navy Cross. The ceremony was attended by Marines from throughout the forward operating base, including the members of the patrol she had saved during the urban engagement. For extraordinary heroism while serving as a sniper with Marine Forces Afghanistan, Staff Sergeant Santos distinguished herself by eliminating an enemy sniper network that had been conducting effective operations against coalition forces for an extended period. Operating alone and under continuous enemy fire, she systematically engaged and eliminated 11 enemy fighters while providing life-saving support to Marines under attack. Her tactical innovation and exceptional marksmanship prevented numerous casualties and neutralized a significant threat to ongoing military operations. The formal inquiry had concluded with an official reprimand for failure to follow direct orders, balanced against recognition that her actions had saved lives and eliminated a serious tactical threat. Maria would remain in the Marine Corps, but her chances for promotion to senior leadership positions had been severely compromised. After the ceremony, Corporal Johnson approached her near the base communications center. Ma'am, I wanted to thank you for what you did out there. I know it cost you, but you saved a lot of lives. Maria looked at the young Marine who had served as her spotter during the engagement. Johnson represented everything she had joined the Marine Corps to protect. Dedicated warriors who deserved leadership that would make the hard decisions when conventional approaches weren't working. Johnson, you would have done the same thing in my position. I hope so, ma'am. But I'm not sure I would have had the skill to pull it off. That evening, Maria sat alone in her quarters, cleaning her rifle and reflecting on the lessons learned from the urban engagement. The enemy snipers had been eliminated, but they had been part of a larger insurgent network that would probably replace them with equally dangerous opponents. The real victory wasn't just the tactical success of eliminating 11 enemy fighters. It was demonstrating that individual Marines could overcome seemingly impossible odds when they combined exceptional skill with the courage to take decisive action. Her radio crackled with an incoming transmission from the base operations center. Santos, report to the command post for mission briefing. We have intelligence on another enemy sniper network operating in the northern sector. Maria smiled as she began reassembling her rifle. The war wasn't over, and there were still Marines who needed someone willing to take on impossible missions against invisible enemies. She had found her purpose, even if it came with a price that would follow her for the rest of her military career. Outside her window, the sun was setting over the Afghan mountains, painting the sky in shades of red that reminded her of muzzle flashes and urban combat. Somewhere in the distance, enemy snipers were probably preparing positions for tomorrow's operations against American patrols. But they had learned something important from the engagement in the city center. American Marines didn't give up, even when facing superior numbers and disadvantageous tactical situations. And sometimes, one Marine with exceptional skill and unshakable determination could change the entire course of a battle. Maria slung her rifle over her shoulder and headed toward the command post. There was work to do, and Marines who were counting on her to find solutions when conventional tactics weren't enough. The invisible enemies could hide in their urban fortresses and use sophisticated tactics to avoid conventional military responses. But they couldn't hide from a Marine sniper who refused to fight by their rules. The hunt would continue, one impossible shot at a time.